Welcome to the Medical Software Consulting channel. The explainer video will now begin.
Welcome to the Medical Software Consulting channel. Here we provide clear explanations of international standards and regulations for medical device software. In today's video, we will explore IEC 62304, the international regulatory standard that defines the software lifecycle for medical devices. We will also look at how Japanese medical device regulations require compliance with this lifecycle standard and why it is critical for both developers and regulatory professionals. Here is the outline of today's session. First, we will look at the regulatory status of medical device software to understand how it is positioned under global regulations. Next, we'll discuss why lifecycle management is essential for medical device software and what risks arise if it is not properly managed. Then, we will go through an overview of the key requirements defined in IEC 62304, the international standard for medical device software lifecycle processes. After that, I will explain how to demonstrate compliance with IEC 62304 in practice, including what regulators typically expect to see. Finally, we will wrap up with a summary to reinforce the key takeaways from this session. In this section, we will discuss the regulatory status of medical device software. First, we'll look at how health software is classified and what distinguishes medical device software from general wellness applications. Next, we'll review the regulatory requirements specific to Japan and how medical device software is positioned under Japanese law. We will then turn to international standards and the expectations of the US FDA, which strongly influence global regulatory practices. Finally, we will consider the relationship between ISO 13485, the quality management standard, and IEC 62304, which defines the lifecycle requirements for medical device software. Together, these standards form the foundation for demonstrating compliance and ensuring patient safety. Here we see the classification of health software. In the upper left, we have software embedded in a medical device. In the lower left, we have standalone software that is itself a medical device, also known as SAMD. The scope of IEC 62304 applies to these two categories. As shown in this diagram, health software refers to the broader concept of software related to health, which includes regulated medical device software. It is important to note that the term health software does not only refer to non-regulated software. Let me explain why compliance with IEC 62304 is required under Japanese medical device regulations. First, according to Article 41, Paragraph 3 of the Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Act, the Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare may establish necessary standards. These are called the essential requirements for medical devices. The original concept of the essential requirements was developed by the Global Harmonization Task Force, or GHTF, and today it is maintained by the IMDRF, the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. The same document is also used as the basis for medical device regulations in the European Union. In Japan, the essential requirements were announced as Ministerial Notification Number 122, and in 2014, Article 12, Paragraph 2 was added. This paragraph introduced requirements for software lifecycle management and risk management. To demonstrate compliance with Article 12, Paragraph 2, conformity with IEC 62304, the international standard for the software lifecycle processes of medical devices, is required. To demonstrate compliance with the latest technology-based development lifecycle for medical device software, there is only one international standard available, IEC 62304, Medical Device Software. Software lifecycle processes. Any medical device that includes software is required to conform to IEC 62304. In Japan, this standard has also been adopted as a national standard under JIST 2304. This slide shows the key regulatory requirements for medical device software. On the left side, we can see the international standards that are required for medical device compliance. These include ISO 13485 for quality management, ISO 14971 for risk management, and IEC 62304 for software lifecycle processes. We also see related standards such as IEC 81001-5-1, which focuses on health software and IT system security, and IEC 62366-1 for usability. In addition, IEC 60601 provides general and particular safety standards for medical electrical equipment, while IEC 82304-1 covers health software and product safety. At the center, the diagram shows how these standards apply to software in a medical device, as well as standalone software that functions as a medical device, known as SAMD. On the right side of the slide, we have the FDA requirements for medical and IT device software. Some are mandatory, such as design controls under 21 CFR Part 820 and the general principles of software validation. Others are important guidelines, such as pre-market submission content for device software, the use of off-the-shelf software, and FDA guidance on cybersecurity. More recently, new draft guidances have been issued that address artificial intelligence-enabled software functions. Overall, this diagram highlights how international standards and FDA requirements together define the regulatory framework that medical device software developers must follow. Medical devices are subject to product safety standards such as IEC 60601-1 and IEC 82304-1. These standards must be demonstrated for compliance through accredited testing organizations in order to manufacture or market medical devices in any country. The product safety standards for medical devices require both basic safety and essential performance. In addition, depending on the type of device, particular safety standards may also apply. For electrical medical devices, compliance with IEC 60601-1 must be demonstrated. If software is used in the device, compliance with IEC 62304 must also be shown. For standalone software as a medical device, or SAMD, the relevant product safety standard is IEC 82304-1. However, as of 2025, no regulatory authority has yet required proof of compliance with IEC 82304-1 specifically for SAMD. That said, compliance with IEC 62304 is always required for SAMD. Here, let's look at the relationship between ISO 13485 and IEC 62304. The official title of ISO 13485 is Medical Devices Quality Management Systems, Requirements for Regulatory Purposes. Any organization that manufactures or markets medical devices must be certified to ISO 13485 by an accredited certification body. ISO 13485 is an independent quality management system standard based on ISO 9001. Compared to ISO 9001, it strengthens certain requirements such as documentation, while ISO 13485 adopts the same process model of Plan, Do, Check, Act as ISO 9001. It is specifically designed for medical devices and therefore cannot be used as a substitute for ISO 9001. ISO 13485 focuses on ensuring consistent quality across the entire life cycle of a medical device, from design and development through manufacturing and ultimately to disposal, so that patient safety is maintained. It outlines the requirements for establishing a quality management system that demonstrates an organization's capability to consistently deliver safe medical devices and related services while meeting both customer and regulatory requirements. IEC 62304 can be positioned within ISO 13485 as part of the product realization process. Specifically, the design and development inputs defined in ISO 13485 Clause 7.3.1 serve as the starting point for executing the software lifecycle processes in IEC 62304, and the outputs from Clause 7.3.4 of ISO 13485 represent the results of these processes. This slide provides an overview of the software development processes and activities defined in IEC 62304. As part of ISO 13485 activities, customer needs are analyzed, and system development activities are carried out, including product-level risk management. Based on the outputs of those activities, the IEC 62304 processes begin. We start with Clause 5.1, Software Development Planning, followed by 5.2, Software Requirements Analysis. Then we proceed to 5.3, Software Architectural Design, and 5.4, Software Detailed Design. Next, we move to 5.5, Software Unit Implementation and Verification, then 5.6, Software Integration and Integration Testing. After that comes 5.7, Software System Testing, and finally 5.8, Software Release, which ensures that customer needs are satisfied. In addition to these main development processes, IEC 62304 also requires 3 supporting processes: Clause 7, Software Risk Management; Clause 8, Software Configuration Management; and Clause 9, the Software Problem Resolution Process. Although this flow looks similar to a traditional waterfall model, IEC 62304 does not prescribe a specific lifecycle model. To apply it in an agile environment, organizations must map or adapt the required processes, activities, and tasks of IEC 62304 into their agile development model. In this section, we will explore why lifecycle management is required for medical device software. First, we need to understand the concept of risk in medical devices. Unlike general software, failures in medical device software can directly impact patient safety. Second, a risk-based approach is essential. This means that we must identify potential risks, evaluate their impact on patients, and implement controls to reduce those risks. Third, we need a strong process approach. Consistent processes are not just about compliance, they are the foundation for improving software quality and ensuring reliable performance over time. Finally, we will look at the differences between IEC 62304 and general software lifecycle processes. IEC 62304 is tailored for medical devices, with a stronger focus on risk management and patient safety. Together, these points explain why lifecycle management is not optional, but a fundamental requirement for medical device software. Let me explain the concept of risk in ISO 14971, Application of Risk Management to Medical Devices. To illustrate this diagram, I will use an example that is not software-related but is easy to understand: spilling hot water from an electric kettle. This diagram shows the sequence from the top. A hazard, which is the potential source of harm, leads through a sequence of events to a hazardous situation and then finally to actual harm. In the kettle example, the hazard and the potential source of harm is the hot water, in other words, the thermal energy. A sequence of events might occur. Someone trips over the power cord, the lid opens, and hot water is spilled. This is the hazardous situation. However, being in a hazardous situation alone does not yet mean that harm has occurred. Harm occurs when someone touches the spilled hot water and suffers a burn injury. In this model, the probability that the sequence of events occurs and leads to a hazardous situation is called P1. The probability that the hazardous situation actually results in harm is P2. The overall probability of harm is determined by considering both P1 and P2, together with the severity of the potential harm. ISO 14971 defines risk as the combination of the probability of occurrence of harm and the severity of that harm. In the case of software, it is often difficult to clearly identify the hazard. the potential source of harm. However, it is not difficult to imagine that if software malfunctions, it could lead from a hazardous situation to actual harm. Let's take the example of a remote surgery system to illustrate why risk management of medical device software is so important. As you can see in the picture on the left, a scalpel clearly carries the risk of injuring a patient. But until now, the manufacturer of the scalpel has not been held responsible for this risk beyond ergonomic design. That's because all the factors leading from hazard to harm were considered to be entirely in the hands of the surgeon. However, if the scalpel becomes part of a remote surgery system, the same risks still exist, but the responsibility for avoiding them is now shared between the surgeon and the manufacturer who supplies the software that controls the scalpel. This means that a certain type of risk control, which in the past depended solely on the professional use of the device without software, has now shifted to software risk management by the manufacturer. In short, as software has become an integral part of medical devices, we need new perspectives on risk analysis and new forms of risk control to ensure safety. In risk analysis, it is necessary to estimate both the probability that a hazardous situation will occur and the probability that this hazardous situation will lead to harm. For hardware failures, the probability can often be estimated. As shown in the figure on the upper left, hardware failures typically follow a bathtub curve over time, combining early failures, random failures, and wear-out failures. For usability-related errors, shown in the upper right, probabilities can also be estimated by analyzing the likelihood of user mistakes. However, software behaves differently. Software is invisible from the outside, and failures caused by software are not probabilistic. They occur systematically. These are known as systematic failures or faults, and unlike hardware failures, the probability of occurrence cannot be easily estimated. That is why failures and malfunctions caused by software are considered very difficult to predict using probability-based methods. Failures and malfunctions caused by software are known as systematic failures or systematic faults. These are defects that arise from software bugs, software-related issues, or even user operations, and because of their nature, it is very difficult to predict their failure rates in advance. A key characteristic of systematic failures and faults is that they are often not detected during final system testing before shipment. Instead, they are frequently discovered only after the product has been released and failures occur in the field. To address this, manufacturers must prevent the introduction of systematic failures and faults throughout the software development process and life cycle. This is done through careful design practices and by detecting and eliminating problems using verification and validation activities. As shown in the figure on the right, in the early stages of design, the focus is on preventing defects from being introduced. In the later stages, the focus shifts to detecting and removing defects before release, and across all stages, we apply verification to confirm that each step of the development process is correct, and finally, we use validation to confirm that the finished product truly meets the user's requirements. In the history of software quality theories, during the 1960s and 1970s, the mainstream approach was the zero defects movement, which aimed to completely eliminate software defects. However, from the 1980s onward, as software grew larger and more complex, people realized that achieving zero defects was unrealistic. Instead, the focus shifted to controlling development processes and lifecycle processes in order to reduce software failures. This process-oriented perspective led to initiatives such as process improvement and maturity evaluation models for software development processes. Meanwhile, in Japan's history of software development, there has long been an emphasis on value and customer satisfaction. Concepts such as must-be quality and attractive quality represented a quality theory that placed the spotlight on product value and customer satisfaction. This way of thinking connects closely with the risk-based approach in IEC 62304, which requires reducing risks to an acceptable level. In fact, IEC 62304 incorporates both approaches. the process-based approach and the risk-based approach, as part of modern efforts to enhance software quality. On the other hand, the history of medical device software regulation can be seen as a history of preventing the recurrence of software-related accidents. In the 1970s, software began to be used in medical devices, and with this, software developers also took on the responsibility of avoiding risks associated with medical device use. Then, in 1985, a serious accident occurred with the radiation therapy device Therac 25. Due to software defects, 6 patients were injured or killed. This tragedy triggered discussions on establishing regulatory requirements for medical device software. During the 1990s and 2000s, it became clear that software failures occur systematically, and that predicting the probability of software-related defects is extremely difficult. As a result, the mainstream idea shifted toward preventing the introduction of systematic failures and faults within development processes and life cycles, and detecting and eliminating them through verification and validation. Finally, in 2006, the IEC 62304 standard was issued. It combines a process-based approach with a risk-based approach in order to reduce risks that could lead to patient harm caused by medical device software. Let's take a look back at the processes and activities of IEC 62304. As we do, you'll notice that the overall structure of this standard follows the process approach. IEC 62304 requires that a software system be classified into software safety classes A, B, or C, depending on the potential impact of software-related hazards on the patient, the operator, or other people. Based on the assigned safety class, the standard then specifies the processes, activities, and tasks that must be carried out, beginning from Clause 5 onward. In other words, IEC 62304 adjusts the requirements for each software process, activity, and task according to the potential impact on patient safety if a software item within the system were to fail. This is what we call the risk-based approach. In the flowchart used to evaluate the software safety class, if risk control measures outside the software system, such as hardware-independent software systems or medical procedures, can prevent the risk caused by the software, then the classification may be reduced to Class A. Furthermore, IEC 62304 takes the position that it is extremely difficult to predict the probability of software failure. Therefore, it assumes the probability of occurrence to be 1. In other words, because software failures are systematic in nature, the probability of occurrence is not considered. Instead, the focus is placed solely on the severity of the harm if a failure occurs, along with the process approach and appropriate risk control measures. Here, I'd like to introduce the IEC 62304 Practical Guidebook. This book was published in September 2016 by the Medical Software Expert Committee of JITA in Japan. The concept of this guidebook is to help developers correctly understand the intention and requirements of IEC 62304 and to practice the real purpose of the standard, namely, establishing a development process that can continuously deliver high-quality and safe medical device software. As you can see in the table of contents, the book covers topics such as the background of IEC 62304, risk-based approaches, key terminology, general requirements, and detailed processes including development, maintenance, risk management, configuration management, problem resolution, and software regulations for medical devices. Now, one important note for our international audience: this guidebook is available only in Japanese. However, in this video, I will walk you through the main ideas and structure of the book, so you can still understand its content and apply its insights, even if you don't read Japanese. This table shows the relationship between the activities and tasks required in the IEC 62304 Clause 5.1 Software Development Plan process and the software safety classes. As you can see, the required activities and tasks vary depending on the software safety class. Some tasks carry more weight for higher safety classes. It is also important to note that even if an activity or task is not marked as mandatory for a given class, you are still free to perform it if it helps ensure software quality and safety. At the bottom of the table, you can see examples of input documents and output documents in the software development process. Through this table, we can clearly see how IEC 62304 adopts a risk-based approach. When we compare the general software lifecycle process, ISO/IEC 12207, with IEC 62304, one major difference lies in how they address risks. ISO/IEC 12207 includes management requirements for risks such as budget overruns or delays in development schedules. In contrast, IEC 62304 does not include such requirements. Instead, IEC 62304 focuses on reducing risks to the users of the software, including patients. In this sense, we can say that IEC 62304 combines a process approach with a risk-based approach, specifically aimed at minimizing patient risk. In this section, we will look at the key requirements of IEC 62304. First, we'll review the overall software development processes and activities defined in the standard. Next, we'll walk through the table of contents of IEC 62304 so you can see how the standard is structured. We will also explain how software safety classes are linked to the specific activities required by IEC 62304. Finally, we'll highlight the relationship between software safety classes and software architecture. By the end of this section, you'll have a clear overview of how IEC 62304 organizes its requirements and how they connect to both process and design. Here, we see the table of contents of IEC 62304, Amendment 1:2015. This international standard defines the lifecycle processes required for medical device software. It starts with the basics, such as the scope, normative references, and definitions. Then, it introduces the general requirements, including the quality management system, risk management, safety classification of the software, and even how to handle legacy software. The largest section is Clause 5, the software development process. This covers everything from planning and requirements analysis to architectural and detailed design, unit implementation, integration testing, system testing, and finally, release of the software. Clause 6 addresses the software maintenance process, focusing on planning, analyzing problems and modifications, and implementing changes. Clause 7 introduces the software risk management process, which is integrated throughout development and maintenance. It requires analysis of software contributing to hazardous situations, defining and evaluating risk control measures, and managing risks when software is changed. Next, Clause 8 describes the software configuration management process, which ensures traceability through configuration identification, change control, and status records. Finally, Clause 9 covers the software problem resolution process. This includes reporting, investigating, and communicating problems, applying change control, keeping records, analyzing trends, and verifying that problems have been properly resolved. Together, these clauses form a comprehensive framework for managing medical device software throughout its entire lifecycle. The software development plan is a key process for ensuring that the quality of medical device software is properly managed. During a conformity assessment for IEC 62304, one of the very first documents reviewed is the software development plan. Auditors want to see how your organization intends to develop the software for this medical device. While the details of each subclause can be found in the IEC 62304 standard and its practical guidebook, let's highlight a few important points here. To manage software quality effectively, organizations often rely on tools such as document management systems, configuration management tools, static analysis tools, change control systems, and modeling tools. According to Clause 5.1.4, the plan must describe the methods and tools used for software development, and importantly, if a tool could affect product quality, ISO 13485 requires that the tool be validated as part of the quality management system. Another key activity is described in Clause 5.1.12, the identification and avoidance of known software anomalies. This means that any abnormal behavior of the software, even bugs where the root cause is not yet understood, must be classified, risk-assessed, and handled in a way that shows they do not contribute to unacceptable risks in the software items. By documenting these procedures clearly, the organization can demonstrate that risks are understood and remain within acceptable limits. This diagram shows an example of how the software development process can be divided into two phases within the software development plan, a prototype phase and a commercialization phase. After completing the software development plan, requirements analysis, and architectural design, the development of the main system begins. This is carried out as part of the design and prototype phase, while integrating reusable modules and external subsystems. During the prototype examination phase, agile methods may be applied for areas such as user interface design, and iterative processes may be used for software items that require experimental verification. Once the prototype system has been verified, the project enters the commercialization phase. Here, the IEC 62304 development process is reviewed again from the beginning, and the execution of each process, activity, and task is reassessed. In a software development plan, it is important to recognize that medical device software development is not always a simple waterfall model. Reuse of existing assets and integration with external systems must be considered. That's why the plan should make clear which processes will be followed, and these should be shared among all project members early in development. From a safety perspective, particular attention must be given to Class C software items. They should be separated where necessary and handled carefully in agile or iterative processes to avoid introducing defects. It is also critical to ensure that risk control measures implemented in software are not invalidated by software changes. Of course, testing, verification, and validation during the commercialization phase will confirm this. But already in the planning stage, the development process should be designed in a way that minimizes the likelihood of such problems. In the process of software requirements analysis, we take the system requirements and the results of risk analysis as inputs, and then create the software requirements specification. System requirements describe the needs of the entire product, system, or service. Risk analysis is performed according to ISO 14971. If risk control measures need to be implemented through software, these requirements are documented in the software requirements specification. The content of the software requirements may include functional and performance requirements, inputs and outputs of the software system, interfaces between the software and other systems, alarms, warnings and messages displayed to the operator, security requirements, user interface requirements, data definitions and database requirements, requirements for software installation and acceptance, IT network-related requirements, user maintenance requirements, and also regulatory requirements. Once the software requirements are defined, the role of the software within the medical device becomes clear. At that stage, we also re-evaluate the risks by considering what potential harm might occur if the software were to fail. During the verification of software requirements, the following points need to be checked. A. Do they implement the system requirements? B. Are they free from internal contradictions? C. Are they expressed in clear terms that avoid ambiguity? D. Are they written in a way that allows test criteria to be established? E. Can each requirement be uniquely identified? F. Can each requirement be traced back to the system requirements or other related requirements? In the process of software architectural design, the input is the software requirements specification, and the output is the software architectural design specification. As software systems have grown in size and complexity, it has become effective to use modeling tools for architectural design. With medical devices now being connected to networks, it is increasingly common to send data to the cloud or to interact with other systems. Modeling tools can be used to represent how the device interacts with other systems and which software items within the system are connected. For commercial off-the-shelf software integrated into medical devices, known as SOUP, software of unknown provenance, it is important to specify the functional and performance requirements of the SOUP, as well as the system hardware and system software that the SOUP requires. During software architectural design, special attention must be given to software items classified as Safety Class C. We need to confirm whether these items are well separated from other software items, whether their responsibilities are cohesive, and whether their level of coupling with other items is kept low. In addition, for software items that implement risk control measures, a failure could directly result in patient harm. Therefore, such items must be clearly separated from other software items, and this separation must be identifiable in the architectural design specification. In practice, it is helpful to use modeling tools to show how risk control software items are separated from other items in the architecture. Let's look at an example of how software safety classes relate to software architecture. As shown in the diagram on the left, when a software item classified as Class C is part of a software system, it means that if this item fails, the patient using the medical device could face death or serious injury. Now think about a situation like the diagram on the right. What if a software item that is strongly connected to many other items is classified as Class C? Or what if that software item itself serves as a risk control measure? In such cases, if a malfunction occurs in one of the related items and it affects the performance of this Class C item, or if there is a bug inside the item itself, it could potentially have a broad impact on many other software items. That is why, in medical device software, separating Class C items and separating items that function as risk control measures is a very important part of software architecture design. To achieve high cohesion and loose coupling for these Class C items, applying object-oriented design principles from software engineering can be especially effective. In the process of software detailed design, the inputs are the software requirements specification and the software architecture design, while the output is the software detailed design specification. Essentially, this stage is where we design the software units. According to IEC 62304, a software unit is defined as a software item that cannot be further divided into smaller items. However, the actual level of granularity is determined by the manufacturer. In practice, you can think of software units as functions in the C language, or as classes in object-oriented programming languages. To make it possible to test each software unit independently, the design should aim for low coupling between units. For example, excessive use of global variables in C can increase coupling between units, so it's something we need to avoid. It is also very important to maintain traceability between the designed software units, the software requirements specification, and the software architecture so that we can follow the links later during verification and validation. In the process of implementing software units, the inputs are the software architecture design and the software detailed design. Based on these, the software units are created, and the outputs include unit test specifications, test results, source code, and the software unit verification report. To ensure the quality of the source code, it is important to establish coding rules and apply a consistent coding style. In addition, static analysis tools should be used to check code quality during development, making sure that all warnings are eliminated as the code is written. For software units classified as Safety Class B or C, clear acceptance criteria for unit testing must be defined. Furthermore, for Class C software units, additional acceptance criteria should be included when necessary. These additional acceptance criteria may include the following: A. Correct event sequences. B. Data and control flows. C. Planned allocation of resources. D. Exception handling, including error definition, detection, and recovery. E. Initialization of variables. F. Self-tests. G. Memory management and prevention of memory overflow. H. Handling of boundary conditions. Finally, the verification of software units must be carried out according to the Software Unit Verification Plan, and the results should be documented in the Software Unit Verification Report. In the process of software integration and integration testing, software units are combined into assemblies of software items, or software items are integrated into higher-level assemblies according to the integration plan. When it comes to software system testing, the goal is to verify that the software requirements have been correctly implemented. In this phase, black box testing is often emphasized, focusing heavily on functional tests. However, functional testing through black box methods may leave some program paths untested. That is why, during software integration testing, it is important to also introduce abnormal inputs or unusual conditions, things that normally would not occur, by using simulators or pseudodata. This allows the execution of white box testing, making the overall test coverage much stronger. In software integration testing, the following points should be considered: clearly defined and documented in the software test plan, the required functions of the software implementation of risk control measures, specified timing and other behaviors, the functions of internal and external interfaces, tests under abnormal conditions, including foreseeable misuse. When integrating a software item into an already combined set of software units, regression testing should be carried out as appropriate. This demonstrates that no new defects have been introduced by the integration. The results of these tests should be recorded in the Software Integration Test Report. The contents of the integration test records should include A. The test results, including a list of passes, failures, and anomalies. B. Sufficient information to allow the tests to be repeated. C. Identification of the tester who performed the integration test. Finally, any anomalies discovered during software integration and integration testing must be handled according to the procedures defined in the software problem resolution process. In the process of software system testing, the key objective is to verify that the requirements for the medical device software have been correctly implemented. In other words, system testing demonstrates that the defined functions are present and that the software, as built, meets both the functional and performance requirements. Software system testing may be carried out in a simulation environment, on the actual target hardware, or on the complete medical device. However, when testing is not performed on the final product, we must carefully consider the differences. When verification is performed on the medical device itself, testing is typically conducted as functional black box testing. In this case, it is important to combine it with integration testing to achieve comprehensive coverage. Whenever the software system is modified, even with very small changes, it is necessary to determine whether full system testing should be repeated. To ensure that no unintended side effects occur, a regression testing scope should be defined, and both the scope and its justification should be documented. Any anomalies discovered during system testing should be handled according to the predefined software problem resolution process. When evaluating system testing, we must confirm that every software requirement has been addressed by a test or verification activity. The relationship between requirements and tests must be recorded in a traceability matrix. Furthermore, the test results must be checked to confirm that they meet the acceptance criteria. The content of software system test records should include A. References to test case procedures that describe required actions and expected results. B. The test results, including pass or fail status and a list of anomalies. C. The version of the software tested. D. The relevant hardware and software test configuration. E. The test tools used. F. The date the tests were performed. G. The identification of the individuals responsible for performing the tests and recording the results. In the process of software release for utilization at the system level, we are required to document the version of the medical device software being released, clearly describe how it was built, and ensure that proper measures are taken during the release. It is important to demonstrate that the software developed through the prescribed development process is identical to the software being released. To achieve this, the tools used during development should be preserved so that the development and build environment can be reproduced if necessary. A software release does not occur only at the time of shipment of the medical device. There are many situations where a release may be needed, for example, to perform system-level validation, to conduct electrical safety and EMC testing on hardware, or to carry out clinical evaluations. For this reason, IEC 62304 explicitly defines software release for utilization at a system level and specifies the requirements for these situations. The activities required for a system-level software release include the following: ensuring software verification is complete, documenting known residual anomalies, evaluating known residual anomalies, documenting the released versions, documenting how the released software was created, confirming completion of activities and tasks, archiving the software, ensuring the integrity of the software release-on of the individuals responsible for performing the tests and recording the results. In the software maintenance process, manufacturers are allowed to use a streamlined process rather than the full software development process when implementing urgent modifications. Manufacturers are also required to establish a post-market surveillance system to collect problem data from the field. This includes communicating issues with users and regulatory authorities to ensure compliance with regulations. In recent years, the growing demand for cybersecurity in medical devices has made it necessary to include procedures in the software maintenance plan for monitoring software vulnerabilities and providing security patches. When establishing a software maintenance plan, the following elements are required. A. Procedures for collecting, documenting, evaluating, resolving, and tracking information that arises after the release of the medical device software. B. Criteria for determining whether the feedback indicates a problem. C. Use of the software risk management process. D. Use of the software problem resolution process to analyze and resolve issues occurring after release. E. Use of the software configuration management process to control modifications to existing systems. F. Procedures for evaluating and implementing SOUP upgrades, bug fixes, patches, and obsolescence management. In the activity of problem and modification analysis, feedback from the market and development environment must be assessed, reported problems must be verified, and possible corrections or changes must be reviewed and approved. Such problems and modification requests may affect the performance, safety, or regulatory approval of the medical device. Therefore, analysis is needed to determine whether the reported problem has an impact or whether the corrective action or modification itself could introduce risks. It is also essential to verify, through traceability analysis and regression testing, that software changes do not inadvertently alter or compromise built-in risk control measures. Furthermore, we must confirm that a software modification does not introduce new hazardous conditions that were not present prior to the change. In the activity of modification implementation, the standard requires that modifications be carried out using the established processes. Finally, the revised software must be released according to the procedures for system-level software release. Software risk management is part of the overall medical device risk management process, and it is difficult to separate the two. IEC 62304 references ISO 14971 and requires the use of a risk management process that complies with ISO 14971. At the same time, IEC 62304 independently requires a software risk management process. There are two main reasons for this. First, anyone applying IEC 62304 must understand the software-related requirements of medical device risk control measures within their area of responsibility for software development. Second, ISO 14971 does not clearly describe how software risk controls should be implemented, nor how they should be integrated into the software development lifecycle. Therefore, IEC 62304 is needed to supplement these aspects. In summary, IEC 62304 requires software risk management so that those familiar with medical device software can analyze risks both caused by software and specific to software and apply appropriate risk controls. In the software risk management process, inputs such as the medical device risk analysis results, the software architecture design specification, published SOUP anomaly lists, and software change specifications are used to carry out risk management. The outputs include the software risk analysis documentation, the traceability matrix, and software change risk analysis reports, all of which form part of the risk management file. When identifying software items that could contribute to hazardous situations, we analyze whether a failure of a given software item could lead to a hazardous state. If so, that software item is designated, and its software safety class is set to either Class B or Class C. This means that any software item assigned to Safety Class B or C has the potential to cause a hazardous situation if it fails. For example, consider a software item that supports diagnosis or treatment in a medical device. If it malfunctions, it could lead to incorrect diagnoses or unintended treatments. If the software that enables the intended diagnostic, therapeutic, or preventive effect of the medical device fails, it could result in patient harm. Similarly, if software responsible for patient identification or ID management malfunctions, the system could mistakenly assign the wrong patient to a diagnosis or treatment. In this way, software bugs can create hazardous situations that may lead to patient harm. Therefore, it is essential to analyze and identify software items that could contribute to hazardous situations as part of the software risk management process. Once such software items are identified, the next step is to determine their potential causes. Examples of potential causes include A. Incorrect or incomplete functional specifications, B. Software defects in the identified software item's functionality, C. Failures or unexpected outcomes arising from SOUPD, hardware failures or software defects that may cause unpredictable software behavior, E. Reasonably foreseeable misuse. Published SOUP anomaly lists should also be evaluated. The potential causes of hazardous situations and the associated risk control measures are documented in the software risk analysis documentation, while the requirements for these risk control measures are captured in the software requirements specification. During verification of risk control measures, it must be confirmed that all risk controls are implemented and validated, and these verification results should be documented in the traceability analysis. Whenever software changes are made, it is necessary to determine whether the changes have introduced new potential causes of hazardous situations and whether new software risk control measures are required. The same analysis applies to changes in SOUP. Based on the risk analysis in the software risk management process, the activities of analyzing software contributing to hazardous situations, defining risk control measures, and verifying those measures are carried out with the results recorded in the traceability matrix. Software configuration management is an essential process for software quality management, not only in medical devices, but in software development in general. Without proper configuration and change management, the likelihood of introducing regressions when making software modifications increases significantly. In the case of medical device software, if a recall is triggered by a software issue and configuration management is not in place, it may be impossible to determine which software version needs to be corrected. To carry out effective configuration and change management, it is practically necessary to introduce configuration management tools and change management tools. However, simply installing tools is not enough. Organizations must also establish documented procedures for configuration and change management, provide training for staff, and monitor whether the processes are being followed correctly. The software problem resolution process is designed to analyze and resolve problems regardless of their nature or cause. Here, a problem includes not only those identified during development, but also issues discovered in the maintenance process or during the execution of other processes. The purpose of applying the problem resolution process is to analyze and resolve problems in a timely manner through documented accountable procedures and to identify recurring trends. In software engineering, this process is often referred to as defect tracking. In the activities of software problem resolution, the manufacturer is required to use the problem resolution process whenever a problem or nonconformity is identified. This activity is essential to ensure that discovered problems are thoroughly analyzed and evaluated with respect to their impact on safety. Finally, the timing for applying the software problem resolution process to identified problems or nonconformities must be described in the software development plan. Legacy software refers to medical device software that was legally placed on the market and is still being sold today, but for which there is insufficient objective evidence that it was developed in compliance with the first edition of IEC 62304. On the other hand, SOUP refers to software of unknown provenance. This means software that has already been developed and is generally available, but was not created specifically for incorporation into a medical device, often known as off-the-shelf software or OTS. It can also mean previously developed software items for which adequate records of the development process are not available. OTS, or off-the-shelf software, is categorized as a type of SOUP. In the next slide, we will explain the IEC 62304 requirements that apply to legacy software. The requirements for legacy software are as follows. Clause 4.4.2, Risk Management Activities. Manufacturers must evaluate all feedback related to legacy software, including internal and external post-production information on incidents or near incidents. Based on this, they must perform risk management activities for the continued use of legacy software, considering integration of the legacy software into the overall medical device architecture, continuing validity of risk control measures implemented within the legacy software, identification of hazardous situations that could arise from its continued use, identification of potential causes where legacy software could contribute to hazardous situations. Definition of risk control measures for each identified potential cause. Clause 4.4.3, Gap Analysis. Based on the software safety class of the legacy software, manufacturers shall perform a gap analysis comparing available deliverables, such as those created before IEC 62304 was applied against the requirements of the standard. In the gap analysis, assess the continuing validity of existing deliverables. If gaps are found, evaluate how much the creation of missing deliverables and related activities could reduce risk. Decide which deliverables to generate and which related activities to perform. With a minimum of software system test records, ensure that risk control measures implemented in legacy software are properly captured in the software requirements. Clause 4.4.4, Gap Closure Activities. Manufacturers must establish and carry out a plan to generate the deliverables identified as missing. Where objective evidence is available, it may be used in place of reperforming activities. This plan may be included in the software maintenance plan. It shall also require use of the software problem resolution process in accordance with Clause 9 to address problems found in legacy software and deliverables. Any changes to legacy software shall be implemented following Clause 6, the software maintenance process. Clause 4.4.5, Rationale for use of legacy software. Finally, manufacturers must document the version of the legacy software together with a clear rationale for its continued use. There are 3 practical ways to demonstrate compliance with IEC 62304. First, by using the documents and tools created under the standard as evidence. Second, by preparing a checklist to self-declare compliance. And third, by using the Official Test Report Form, or TRF, issued by IEC or IECEE. These approaches make it clear and structured to show that your software development process meets the requirements of IEC 62304. Here are examples of documents created and tools used under IEC 62304. To demonstrate compliance with IEC 62304, it is necessary to prepare these documents and deliverables. As for tools, in practice you will need document management tools, issue tracking tools, configuration management tools, change management tools, modeling tools, static test tools. When such tools can affect the quality of a medical device, they must be validated as QMS software in accordance with the requirements of ISO 13485. Here are examples of medical device software documents and tools required by the US FDA. These documents are almost the same as those created under IEC 62304. However, when submitting a medical device application in the United States, manufacturers must explain how each document required by the FDA guidance corresponds to the documents created under IEC 62304. In practice, this often means preparing a cover page with the document name specified by the FDA guidance and then attaching the relevant contents from the IEC 62304 documentation. This is an example of how to demonstrate compliance with IEC 62304. As shown in the table on the right, you can create your own checklist that lists each clause and subclause of IEC 62304. In this table, you indicate the software safety class, and for each activity and task, you provide the document control number as evidence of implementation. If a notified body or regulatory authority requests it, you can then present the corresponding documents as proof of compliance. This example shows how to use the TRF, or Test Report Form, issued by IEC and IECEE. The Test Report Form lists all of the requirements of IEC 62304. For each requirement, if applicable, you provide evidence as results or remarks and record the verdict. In fact, the TRF for IEC 60601-1 includes an annex for IEC 62304. In the same way, you provide both the evidence and the verdict for each corresponding requirement. Section 5. Summary. Let's wrap up with the key points. First, medical device software requires a development lifecycle that reflects the latest technology. Second, IEC 62304 provides the standard framework for managing that lifecycle. Third, IEC 62304 is unique in that it combines a risk-based approach with a process approach. And finally, there are several ways to demonstrate compliance with IEC 62304. Each organization can choose the method that best fits its own situation. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And if your organization needs consultation on IEC 62304 or other medical device software regulations, feel free to contact us at Medical Software Consulting. We'll be happy to support you.